Well, thank you all for joining. My name is Abner Germano from Juniper Networks, Abner G on Twitter. I think I know most of you by your Twitter handles, and it's awesome to see many of you for the first time. So thank you, or welcome back. This is our fourth network field day. We missed, I think it was two or three, I believe it was, that we missed. And we're supportive of this effort for a number of different reasons, most of which Ethan put in his blog the other day. But there's one extra one that I want to build on, and I will comment on this. I started writing something the other day. And that's that you guys ask really great questions. And you do it in a very open way. You do it in a way that challenges vendors, that challenges yourselves. And that's incredibly important in a time of change. So that's the reason why we were sponsoring the very first network field day with many of you. That's the reason I know many of you going back long before even my time here at Juniper. So I want to just thank you for that. I know it's hard. Sometimes it's expensive if you publish a good post and all of a sudden you blow out your own hosting facility. So we appreciate that. And we are very supportive of that in a variety of different ways. Some of you may have noticed that last night I tweeted a little statement saying that infrastructure is code. And we're going to see a theme of that today, because the way that the IT infrastructure is put together has changed dramatically over the last decade. The application architectures are different. The user behaviors are different. The storage and compute architectures are different, and the network architectures are changing dramatically. And that means that the decisions that you make and that your peers make are very different from what we've had in the past. And can actually make or break those larger efforts. So with that, one of the things that we've been doing at Juniper is we've been trying to get into the heads of those in different places in the IT world. And one of the efforts there came from many conversations with customers about what are they using to manage their infrastructure. And our customers, who are some of the largest service providers, search, social, Wall Street companies in the world, have all said some similar things. One of those things is that this notion of infrastructure as code. And so one place where we've started to put a little dent in the way that we do things is in operating with things like Puppet. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy Schulman. Jeremy, I'll let you talk about where in Juniper you sit and what we're doing with enabling the infrastructure, the network infrastructure, to talk to the rest of the IT environment and work really well with the rest of the IT environment. And I won't give you the slides on, I make a change in the server and how long does it take for the network to go, because I know that you guys know all that. So without further ado, Jeremy.
Thank you, Abner. So thank you guys for coming. This is my first time doing this, and so this will be fun for me, and I appreciate any questions you guys have as we go along. I know I'm kind of a new face for you guys, so I wanted to do a quick intro about myself, as Abner said, who I am, where I sit in Juniper, and why I get to talk with you guys. So I am kind of a hybrid role at Juniper. I was a solutions architect for networking for a number of years, and before that, I was a software engineer for about 12 years. And in the beginning of 2012, we started to see a lot of interest from our customers who wanted to automate the network in some way, because they had larger workflow systems that were already being automated and the network just needed to catch up. So we started to have conversations with them, and I became what Derek calls a workflow Sherpa. And this is me hacking my way out of the dark forest of Brockway despair. So in 2012, we were talking with a bunch of people and trying to figure things out, and we were hacking away. And everybody wanted automation the kind of way we all want ice cream, right? You know, you can talk to the networking guys, and you say, do you need to automate your network? And they say, absolutely, we do. And then since I had a programming background, and I spent a lot of time with the automation infrastructure inside of JunOS, which if you're unfamiliar with, I'll kind of share a little bit about that. It kind of came out that there was a group of people in networking that didn't have the opportunity to really explore programming for themselves, whether they were just too busy to keep the lights on, or they just didn't have any interest, or their management just didn't trust the guys to do it. They just weren't doing it, and they were looking for the vendors to help them with automation. So, you know, as we were hacking through this dark forest of broccoli despair, we started running into patterns with our customers, as Abner said. And where we saw the biggest pain point are things like in the data center where there were basic tasks that needed to be performed where the IT sysadmin or the DevOps guys intersected with networking. Simple things like top-of-rack switching, you know, ports and VLANs. And while these were simple tasks, you know, at large scale, they became very problematic. Because if you're a server guy and you're rolling out a new web server and you have 10,000 of them and you need a new VLAN or some new port change, how hard is it for the networking guys to make all the changes to all the switches to make that happen? Usually there's a lot of change request tickets going on. So, you know, usually there's some kind of manual process and there's a lot of finger pointing and then, you know, there's packet sniffers and the whole world kind of falls apart. And if you're a large organization, you're trying to simply just get your service on the net because that's how you make money, and the network is in the way, this is a real problem. And so we started talking with the networking guys, and they said, we need help, we want you to write stuff for us, but then we want it to be vendor neutral because, you know, we live in the real world and it's a heterogeneous environment. And the guys at network, and the guys like myself, you know, I could build sample code and I could kind of help them along, but it wasn't really good enough. So one time, the networking guys said, you should really talk to our DevOps, because whatever it is they want, you need to talk to them, because they're going to be the ones who are going to write it for us. But they don't know that yet, so you need to convince them to write code for us so that we can deploy your hardware. And that's what our sales guys basically kept pulling me in for. You know, I'm kind of an agent of the field. I help with the discussion, and then I always somehow had to write code, which I enjoy doing, but that's not what I really do. I mean, so we talked to the DevOps, right? You guys are familiar with, I'm assuming, with the term DevOps. And you guys familiar with Puppet, more or less? Yep. Yeah. We'll do a little thing about Puppet.
Awesome.
And the DevOps guy said, well, we use this thing called Puppet. Why don't you just make your stuff work with Puppet? Because then we'll just use the same tool to manage what we want to do. And you guys don't have to, you know, we don't have to write some special homebrew web portal, click here, log in. And I'm like, what's a Puppet? Because I didn't know. I live under a rock at this time. So they said, you know, you really need to stop being under a rock and see what Puppet is. And so it turns out that we use Puppet at Juniper, right, in our IT infrastructure. So I talked to a buddy of mine whose name is also Jeremy. It's not me. And he said, this is what we're doing with Puppet, and my face exploded. I'm like, wow, I didn't know we had configuration management tools that did these types of activities, and while it's solving the same problem we have in networking, how did I not know about this? And so he knew everything about Puppet and nothing about networking, because that's what he did. And I knew everything about networking and a little bit about automation, and so we collaborated on a proof of concept, and we showed it to a few people, and we're like, is this what you wanted? And they said, do you guys have a Puppet agent running on your switch? We're like, yeah, isn't that what you wanted? They're like, yeah. And they're like, do you know what this means? And I'm like, no. And they started to basically sit me down with the IT DevOps guys. I basically had conversations with the networking guys, but they said, you just need to talk to our DevOps. And I spent a lot of time with the DevOps guys to understand their processes, their workflows, how they use tools like Razor and Cobbler and mCollective, and all of these things that were just making my head explode, thinking, how can I apply these technologies to networking? Why do we need to invent new tools and technology for networking when we have tools and technology today if we just simply did a few things to make them apply? Now, are these tools for everybody? Probably not, right? This is a very enterprise-centric kind of solution. We see Puppet, we see Chef, we see some others. So one of the things that DevOps guys told me was, we use a lot of different tools. Don't tell us to use one tool. Make sure that it's open. Make sure that it's vendor neutral, because we live in the real world. And so we took all of this feedback, and we rewrote the code about 4 times, because we were learning in this process, and we had some really nice help from the guys at Puppet Labs, and they were very instrumental. And so I wanted to share with you what we've got going on, where we're at, what we're doing. I've got a demo if you guys would like to see it. And I'll kind of, as we go along, educate you guys about Puppet a little bit. Really quick show of hands. Who programs the network now? Who writes code? OK. And so the rest of you don't. The question is why? Anyone? You don't want to?
For me, it's not what I do. I've never been a code guy. I would always love to have been. It's just not how my head works. So I have to find other tools that help me get the automation done, whether it's a network management platform or engineers who are smarter than me.
OK. All right. I hear that a lot. We are consumers of automation, the networking guys, just like we're consumers of ice cream. And I like my car, and I go to my car guy, and he's like, you could tinker under the hood. And I'm like, no, I just want to drive my car. I'll pay you to do it. And that's fine. I think that, by and large, that's a very true thing. Anybody else?
The single biggest problem is the lack of APIs.
The lack of APIs.
So all of the networking vendors for the last decade have not produced anything better than an SNMP as an API.
OK.
Right? And so cutting code for that, or cutting code for a Cisco ASA or an SRX or a NetScreen just isn't viable or isn't a valuable investment of time if you can't universalize that.
Screen scraping.
Well, I think that, as someone who writes really crappy shell scripts and uses things like Puppet, that one of the challenges in it over the years is, there's netcom or SSH or netconf over SSH. There's beep. There's all these SNMP to a point, although I've never been able to actually configure a switch via that. Trigger sucking configuration. You end up defaulting to termination, expect scripts, stuff like that. It's one of the reasons the ears perk up when I see hear Puppet for networking equipment, because it's things that we've used on the system side for a while to configure applications and personalities, and that. And it's kind of the natural extension to bring it back down to the networking layer. It's just easier.
It's got to be universal, right? Whatever. Back in the late 90s, we used to script everything. We would Perl SNMP to configure routers, to make custom configurations, to log in and run spec scripts on routers. Every network engineer was a coder.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And then the CLIs advanced to the point where we didn't need to do those things, and that skill's now gone. But there's no reason to bring it back when there's no decent APIs in the routers that are universally, right? So I should still, in 2013, there is no standardized way to put a firewall rule across every firewall in the industry. There is no standard way to add a static route. Now they should be standard APIs, right?
Right.
We should all agree that this is going to be the API call, and it should work on every single router everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the other feedback that we got from our customers when we started kind of showing what we were doing with Puppet, they said, exactly, a VLAN is a VLAN, and a port is a port. And I see that you guys are doing stuff with Puppet, and some other guys have done some stuff with Puppet, and they kind of screwed it up, and they didn't like it. And they said, why can't everybody just have the same mechanism to provision a VLAN? Why is that so hard?
Yeah.
Right?
It's universal. An Ethernet port's only it's got to be in a VLAN, it's got to be trunked, and it's got to,
Yeah.
Why not just do like SNMP and say this is the interface to MIB, and we configure those things?
So
there's a whole bunch of other fancy features that we could use. But can't we just automate those?
Can we all just get along?
Yeah. The same way?
Yeah. So when we were getting feedback, we actually heard from a very loud customer about this. He said, whatever you do, don't do the following. Don't put your name on it. Don't maybe get Juniper blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Right? Because we want something that's vendor neutral. Okay. And try to get other people involved. Take off the Juniper hat. Because this is what your customers want. DevOps, they want this universal API. Now that doesn't mean it's everybody's doing Puppet or everybody's doing Chef, but if you're in that framework, if you're in that context, don't get an ass out, right? Just try to do it okay.
Sponsored by instead of Juniper does.
Okay. Anybody else?
It's just too hard.
Just too hard.
That's a corollary to what Craig said.
I'm seeing corporate anorexia where the people that I consult for don't have enough staff. Sometimes that's why we're there, is because they're willing to pay the consulting tax in order to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
But the guys maybe haven't programmed. They certainly don't have the time. So it's kind of the alligators. They're knee-deep in alligators, but they don't have time to fix the swamp.
Yeah. That's a brilliant point, because I was running around, hacking away and saying, oh, networking guys, learn netcomms, learn how to program and whatever. And that really came up a lot. And so I had to think about that really hard. Do I want to try to teach the networking industry guys who know networking brilliantly but are not programmers, which I will, which I do. Like if I find guys who want to program and they don't know how, but they really are interested, I actually host workshops and I do this. But when I started, walking through this dark forest of broccoli despair, and I stumbled upon this new tribe called DevOps, they're like, we like to program everything. I actually ran into some guys that said, this actually happened. I was talking to a name brand customer. We're trying to insert ourselves, and we're talking about automation, and they're big Puppet users. And I said, I would really like to talk to your network engineering guy so that I can kind of talk to him about what Juniper's doing. And he said to me, we don't have network engineers. If the box isn't programmable through an API, we don't even bring it in. And that was a very kind of defining moment for me.
Can you repeat that statement to all the network engineers in the room?
Yeah. Oh, I tell this story a lot, actually.
Yeah, I think it's a good story to tell.
Yeah.
That we don't have network engineers to type in configurations. We have network architects and engineers to define manifests and topology and interoperability and test and manage that, right?
That's right. So
Well,
this
but I mean, since when have so vendors have the value of a Juniper is JunOS? You guys are going to tell us, oh, we've always been a software company, but your value is your API, your custom API. It's the CLI. Do the magic. Cisco's no different with iOS, right? So that culture for you guys staying and saying, oh, well, why aren't you guys programming? Why aren't you doing NetOps? Why aren't you doing DevOps? It's like, well, you've never wanted us to. We're doing exactly what we've been given.
Yeah.
So when we say, yeah, we want flexibility, that's why. Because we agree. We all went to computer science for college too, right? So.
Some of us dropped out.
All right. You make more money than I do.
So has anybody actually tried to write a program and you were successful in doing it, but then your management shut it down because they're worried about scripts gone wild, Right, gone wild. I want to tell you a story about a friend of mine who went through this, actually. He's a very brilliant guy. And he had a very difficult problem to solve. It's a really super complex network. They had a very large number of customers, and he had to take some transition, some kind of configuration transition that was going on. And he said, this is going to be a train wreck if we do this manually. It'll take like 10 months, and it'll be a disaster. And he sat down, he had a software mind, and he had a big picture mind. He's an architecture kind of guy. And he sat down, and over the course of like 6 weeks, he wrote this code. I think it was in Perl and whatnot. And he netted it out, and he was really successful with it, and he was really happy about it. He's like, yeah! And then he showed it to his management, and they shut him down. Because they were afraid of scripts gone wild, right? And this was a very sad story for me to hear, because here's a guy who's motivated, intelligent, took the time and energy to do it, proved that it worked, and then management was afraid of the risk. So when I talk to networking guys, they're like, I can't do it because I'm afraid that I'm not smart enough to do it, and I'm afraid that I'll get fired and they'll be blamed. And this is why networking guys like to buy software from vendors, because then they can blame them. That's okay. I mean, that's what we're here for. So. But that was an interesting story. I wondered if you guys ever thought about that. It's about blame and risk.
It comes up all the time. They don't want to use automation. I built a network management product.
Yeah.
And one of the things was configuration management. Exactly the same thing. No, I can't do this because it will break my entire network in a heartbeat faster than I can go back and fix it.
Right. Faster. Right.
There's two sides of the coin to blame here. One is, we had a presentation yesterday where we talked about robust yet fragile. Right? So we inherently build networks as fragile systems that fail. But what we don't do is we don't let them fail. We try to make them robust at the same time. So there's a fundamental failing there. And the second failing that we have in IT is that we've got managers who are ill-conceived. they've been taught how to be managers, but not how to be technologists. And there's a current sort of pervasive thing in American culture particularly, that to be a manager you don't have to know anything about your product, you just manage. Managing itself is a skill. But in fact, and what that led to in IT is a lot of incompetent managers. And I mean incompetent because they're not able to understand the product that they manage.
Yeah.
And so part of the problem is you go to your manager and say, I'm going to do this, and they say, is there a risk attached to it? And you have to say, yeah, because there's a risk that you'll die going home tonight. A satellite, a meteorite will fly out of the sky and kill you. There's a risk, right? But that's all they hear, and they go, well, I'm a manager. I have to solve risks. I won't take risks. Solve.
Right.
And so we actually have a multi-part problem. We have the technology problem, but we also have ITIL ITSM, which says no change means no risk.
Okay.
Right?
No change is the risk. It's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But a manager doesn't see that, right? Because they choose nothing, then they've just managed something. They've taken a proactive step. So there's actually more than one issue here.
Yeah. It is I don't want to say cultural, but there's a systemic problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I think is really interesting, when I started talking with the DevOps guys, I said, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or whenever, there was no DevOps, right? What happened?
No, there was DevOps. It was
Oh.
a revision to me.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't know. I didn't know.
When I first came to Silicon Valley during the .com, I was an ops guy reporting to a software architect on the dev team. Freaking SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, ITIL, all these organizational structures that were trying to control the insanity of all the real estate agents getting into our industry. It's set up all this segregation, even between roles of system engineer, network engineer, and applications guy, even broken down that part. But you go back down to the late 90s, they're just teams that wrote code and deployed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we look at what's going on with the data center, just this large, massive scale, virtualization, massive servers, the scale problem, what I was told was that the scale problem over the years just demanded that they had to automate it, right? They had to automate it. You can't automate, you can't by hand set up 10,000 servers. You just couldn't do that. And somebody basically told me that there was a period during that .com bubble where you had all these startups and all these really smart developers, and they basically had to also wear the hat of the IT guy, and they're like, this is crap. I'm not going to do this by hand. And then it basically, spun up this.
A lot of shell scripts.
A lot of shell scripts became, and then some guys said there's got to be a better way, and that's where we get tools like Puppet and Chef and other tools like that. So all of the problems that you guys described, it's hard, I don't have time, I want to de-risk, I need other people to go to. If I look back at a tool like Puppet and Chef, and the community behind it, it starts to solve these problems, I think. That's right.
The people who are doing this have developed these skills with CLI, have not developed programming skills, so the confidence in their skills for configuring the systems to do the automated control.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did is we said, I'm going to be a DevOps, right? We're gonna pretend we're DevOps, and we're gonna do this the DevOps way. So we built a native JunOS agent, and I'll kind of show you how that kind of worked. We created a Puppet module that we called NetDev because we didn't want to call it JunOS anything. We just called it NetDev, and I'll show you what that means. And we put it in GitHub, and it's in the open source, and you guys can fork it, and we hope that other networking vendors do, right? That was the intent, because we want there to be a kind of standard-ish, or at least a general same approach to doing the basic things. And if people don't like it, then they should tell us. It's like, this sucks, change it. And we're like, okay, well, we'll do that, or they can do it on their own. Everything's where it should be. We put the Puppet module in the Puppet forge, so that people who use Puppet can go Puppet module install, and they get it, right? Why should we make things hard, right? If we're using Ruby, right, we should put our Ruby gems in GemOrgs, and you can say gem install, right, and you get it, right? Why do we have to hide things behind websites with passwords? I mean, that's silliness. So we also need to support the community, right? The community needs a forum. So there are obviously many forums for Puppet, and since we're doing something with JunOS, we wanted to create an environment for people to basically rail at us about the Puppet or the JunOS specific stuff, so we've done that. And we put in the tech pubs, and of course, it's free, because that's what DevOps wants anyways. Right? And when we rolled this out, and we did this a few weeks ago, actually, this is kind of recent when we just rolled it out, the middle of February, we rolled it out on 3 platforms, which was really targeted at top of rack. right? Our 1 gig, our 10 gig, and our QFX. And then we started kind of putting out the soft feelers, like, hey, what do you guys think, blah, blah, blah. And then we started to get this feedback like, well, what about the small switches? What about EX2200s? I got wiring switches everywhere. What if we could use Puppet to manage those? Or what about our chassis? Or what about this? Or what about our MXs? What about, we use MXs in the data center. What about this? And, I wasn't getting it just from our customers, but I was getting it from the internal guys at Juniper, because they started to see what the community was about with Puppet. Because you go to Juniper and you say, hey, you know about Puppet? And everybody's like, no, what's Puppet? Right? I mean, so a lot of the stuff I do internally is talking about Puppet. So somebody said one JunOS or JunOS. He said, well, how hard is it to get this on all of our JunOS platforms? Like all of them. Because they're all generally JunOS. So it actually isn't that hard, right? Because of the way in which I'm going to show you how we did this. And so we actually have it on all of our EX platforms, not just a few. All of them. And even ones that you're about to hear about months from now that don't exist for sale, but they will all run Puppet. Our MXs, from the smallest 5 to the 960 chassis, run Puppet. Woot. And then everybody said, well, what about the firewalls? What if we could manage firewalls with Puppet? Yeah, you can do that too. I'm working on it, right? So, I actually have it working in the lab. So really, all of our platforms that run JunOS. Oh, have you heard of JunoSphere? You know what JunoSphere is? Kind of a virtual environment. You can set up, routers and whatnot, and you can set up CentOS hosts and packet generators. And it's a tool for people to play around with networking. Supports Puppet. We have a virtual MX. I actually dev tested this code in JunoSphere. So let's think about that, right? I could actually spin up, 100 virtual MXs, and now connect that to my physical network and run Puppet.
So are you doing internally, maybe even setting this as a reference for your customer base, of doing Puppet as a distribution tool, but kind of a continuous integration system into JunoSphere, and then staging that for deployment in your public network?
Okay.
Your smoke test through that?
Yeah, brilliant. Somebody asked me, can you make Vagrant work with Puppet and JunOS, right? And that's kind of a general model of that, right? Yeah. So I'm going to do a really quick thing about the Puppet model for you guys. Do you guys know about how the Puppet architecture and infrastructure works? Would you like kind of like a 5-minute thing on that?
I think it's worth it for the viewers and everyone to go through it.
All right, so we'll do about a Puppet run. Yes.
Quick one on the dates. I saw early adopter was 2.15. The GA release for all the other platforms supporting Puppet, is that now, future?
Yeah, good question. Fair question. So in full disclosure, I'm not PLM, so you can't hold me to anything. I will tell you what we're targeting to do, right? So every JunOS device that can accept what we call a loadable package can support Puppet. So some of them do that now and have historically done that in the past, like the MX platform. And some of them just recently got that capability as part of a 12.2, 12.3 release. And some of them are getting that capability as part of a future release like 13.2. So we're kind of doing it in little, as those releases support. But we're targeting the early part of April to have broad EX and MX support. So now I'm responsible for that statement.